Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we are talking about part 5 of Twilight of the Republic First Impression Review. So, as usual, those reviews are first impressions, so I haven't played with most of those cards, and therefore everything I say must be taken with a grain of salt. Moving on here with the way I rate these things, I have 4 rankings. It's not exciting. I think the card is either bad or it's going to be very niche. So it doesn't mean unplayable, but it means the card is going to be super niche. Not sure means that we don't have enough information, and I'm not sure whether the card is going to see play or not. Good means I think the card is likely to see play, and it seems quite solid and competitive. And then finally, amazing, a card that seems insane and could be meta defining, meaning that the card could be, it's not guaranteed, but would have implication that changes the way we play the game and the way we build decks. Moving on, we got our first one is Bo-Katan Kryze, and this guy is interesting, and this girl, I think she's a woman. Anyway, it's a Mandalorian kind of 2-drop, which is nice. 2-drops are always valuable in aggro decks. Unfortunately, it is in villainy, and most of the Mandalorian archetypes that we've seen have been focused on heroism, so it is a bit off-brand in that sense. And even in the appropriate deck, even if she was heroism, she would be quite not amazing, because the bottom line is that she's a 2/3, which is pretty bad, and she requires another unit to be in play to get bonuses, and that's a problem because if you are playing second, your opponent plays something a 3/3, which is very common. The 3/3 can attack and kill your 2/3 before she has time to become bigger. And even when she does become bigger, she will go back down to a 2/3 as soon as that other unit gets killed. So, and what she gets is not amazing. The +1 attack is by far the most valuable bonus that she gets, but then Overwhelm Saboteur is simply not that great on such a small body. So, in my opinion, I don't think she's very good. She might see, if ever we see a Mandalorian villainy deck, she might be okay. Even then, I'm not super excited about it. But yeah, no, it's either not good or just extremely niche. Moving on, we got the new leader, the long-awaited Anakin Skywalker. And this leader is very interesting. He's about just dealing damage to himself in order to get bonuses. So his leader ability is very powerful here. You get to get +2 attack while attacking a unit. This can allow you to get amazing trades in the early share of the game for no resource costs. This can really allow you to get ahead in the board early on in the game. You do have to deal damage to your own base in order to do that, and we know that damaging the base is not something to take lightly in this game that is very tempo focused. With that being said, being able to get a positive trade in the early stage of the game can really save you on the long run way more than 2 HP. So if you think that the trade that you're going to take is going to allow you to get ahead in a significant way, or will allow you to save way more than 2 damage, then it is very worth using. Obviously, against control or against decks that are not really going to kill you, self-damaging your base is not as big of a cost, and once again can allow you to get ahead on the board early on in the game. So I actually like the ability quite a bit. The other thing, the deploy, this is really where Anakin shines. His body is just humongously big. It comes out on 6, which is a little bit late, but what you do get for 6 resource is just pretty amazing. You got 3 very relevant traits: Republic, Jedi, Force. He's 4/7, and he gets +1 attack for every 5 damage on your base. It is reasonable to expect that around turn 5, you should have at least 10 damage on your base, which means that on average, Anakin Skywalker should be about 6/7, which is way above what we are seeing before. And it also does get Overwhelm, and obviously it can get much bigger than that. It can also get smaller, but I would say that with the ability, it is quite easy to get yourself to at least 6 attack. And once again, being 7 attack also not that difficult, meaning that you can potentially one-shot a Boba Fett, which is very valuable, especially since he comes down after Boba Fett's big turn, so you're fairly likely to be at 15 damage at this point whenever you play against Boba. this will allow you to one-shot Boba, which is just super strong. So I think Anakin is very well-rounded. He's one of those leaders which doesn't require specific synergies to be good. I think he can be just decent in any deck. There's a couple of cards that are slightly better with him that get bonuses for having 15 damage on base or whatever. But it's relatively, I don't even think you need those cards to make the card good. I think the card is just very solid on its own. So it's a very well-rounded card, and it's nice that such an important character of the Clone Wars is going to be quite well represented in Star Wars Unlimited. So for me, it is a thumbs up. I don't think it's like quite on the same level as stuff like Han, for example, in terms of like his leader ability, but he's definitely solid enough that I think he's going to see a lot of play. Also, worth noticing that he's in a color combination here, red-white, that is extremely competitive, but he does something that is quite different from the two other very strong leaders in that category, like Sabine and Han. So I think he's chances to see play, and there's obviously a lot of very powerful cards in red-white. Then we got Droideka Security, which is our first exploit sentinel cards, I believe. So I think that exploit naturally is relatively weak to aggro, because what happens is that you are spending multiple turns not really doing anything to stop aggro, like putting some 1/1s on the board, so you can exploit into bigger cards later on in the game. And this is a strategy which naturally does not fare well against aggro, because it's by definition pretty slow. So I think Droideka has the advantage of being quite useful against aggro, where big sentinel units are always a great way to play against aggro, and especially since aggro decks have been kind of going away from Spectral Soldiers. So I think Droideka can help in this case. I don't think the card is amazing, but it could serve a purpose that I think might be required in the meta as we speak, because it does compensate from one of the major weaknesses of exploit archetypes. So for me, I'm going to give it a try. We'll see if end up seeing play, but I think it has potential, because it does fulfill a role that I think no other card at the moment does seem to fill in this exploit archetype. So yeah, granted you can exploit 1, just by 4 exploit 1, 4 or 5 sentinels is quite a good deal. If you exploit 2, then it's really a good deal. So yeah, there's that. And then you got Clone. So the Clone is the 7 cost units that can copy into any other units. We see those in Magic. In Magic they cost 4 mana. In this game they cost 7 resource, which is a humongous amount. So you can copy with anything in play. So here's the 2 problems with those kind of card. The first problem is obviously the fact that it is quite situational. There needs to be a unit in play that cost at least 7 or more. I mean, obviously you can copy something smaller, but then you're not really getting a good deal, because you are spending 7 resources in order to copy something that you can copy something that does cost 4. So for example, you're losing 3 resources worth of value there. So obviously the card is better if you copy something that costs 7 or more. So in order to really make good use of this card, there needs to be a card that is worth copying on the battlefield. So it can be your own card, or it can be a card of your opponent, but there still needs to be that big card into play in order to be able to play this. The other problem with this card is that it does not copy vehicles, and vehicles are some of the biggest units in this game. You talk about Avenger, Devastator, Ohm-1, Reinforcement Walker, like the majority of very large units in this game are vehicles. So that's already a huge chunk of cards that you cannot copy. Actually, most of the cards that cost 7 or more are vehicles. So that's another massive limitations for this card. So yeah, it doesn't copy leader either. Not as big of a deal, but also like makes it even more situational. So it is, in my opinion, extremely situational and extremely overpriced. I don't think this is a good card at all. Yes, it does something unique that no other card in the game can do, and maybe there's a combo that I overlooked, but assuming this special combo that breaks the card doesn't exist, I don't think this card is good at all. So yeah, I don't think it's a good card. It should have costed, I think in order for this card to be good, it should have costed 4 like it does in Magic, pretty much. Then we got Saw Gerrera, a huge amount of stats here on the 6-drop with a 6/8, 4/8 with Raid 2, and the ability that is conditional and only triggers on attack. Obviously, like a large unit that costs 6 that have an on-attack ability, it is naturally something you want to use on ECL. The problem here is that you have an additional condition that it needs to be 15 damage on your base, and that's something that you do not really control unless maybe you're playing Anakin. But even so, still fairly situational, only works on ground units as well. So yeah, the ability is very situational. So basically, this guy is just a big boy for 6, and I think there's just much better things to do for 6 resources in this game, especially in a red-white color combination that is particularly competitive. So I don't like that card. Moving on, we got 5s. So 5s is a 5/5 for 5 Saboteur. When you play an event, you may put a clone in your discard pile back at the bottom of your deck. If you do, you draw a card. So it's a 5-drop with no immediate impact on the game. So that's already by itself a kind of a deal breaker. It's not great. It's not jailbreaker, obviously. We have Poe, which is a great example of a 5/5 for 5. There is no immediate impact that does pair very well. But here there's a couple of here obviously what you get for what you pay is not amazing. 5/5 stat line is now considered to be quite for something that doesn't have an immediate impact on the game. 5/5 for 5 is not amazing stats. The Saboteur is situational, and the ability is also very situational. You need to discard to survive, then you need to play an event, then you need to have clones in your discard pile. That's just a lot that needs to happen for this to be any good. With all that being said, there's something to be said. 5s has a lot of very useful trait with Republic, Clone, and Trooper, and it is in the cunning aspect, which means that it can very easily be cheated in play with a card. There's 2 of them so it's one of those 5 drops that can be cheated with 2 of them, and if you can cheat it with 2 of them, then the card becomes a lot better. And surprisingly, there's just not that many cards that are very well suited to be cheated in play with there's 2 of them. So maybe there's a bit of ways that this card could see play from that extent. So I'm going to give it a try just for that reason. Next, we got a new leader, Asajj Ventress. So she has a very powerful leader ability that gives +1 attack after you played an event. So it is very similar to what you get with IG-88, but it is much easier to trigger because it only something that is concerned with what you play. It's something that you have much more control over. And then she deploys early with not a lot of stats, but same amount of stats as a Sabine. So not terrible. She is susceptible to open fire and a lot of cards that can deal 4 damage, and notably she can be killed very easily by Boba attack and all that stuff. So she has a weakness. She's a bit squishy, but because she deploys so early, I don't think that's as big of a deal, and her ability becomes like a lot better because then she gets to deal damage to something without taking damage back, which means that you can use that ability to effectively one-shot something. So you can use, for example, Surprise Strike combined with her ability to one-shot a Boba Fett, which is pretty nice. So Asajj Ventress has this, and because she comes into play on 4, she will be able to deploy before Boba gets to deploy, and she gets to ambush that. Obviously, Boba has a lot of plays into this. He can just kill Asajj with a Bossk or with any ambush unit in his deck to prevent that from happening, but I still think it's something that is worth noticing. She also has a lot of very useful traits, notably Force and Separatist. Yeah, I think Asajj has the potential to be a great aggro leader for Villainy. Kylo Ren was the aggro leader in set 2, and it was a decent deck, but a little bit clunky most of the time. Asajj has an action ability that is much easier to use because it requires you to play events. Asajj might be better off in some sort of tempo deck and stuff like this. Once again, her color combination means that she's going to be compared to Boba Fett. So I'm not entirely sure that with Boba Fett still being a thing, I'm not 100% certain that aggro decks, aggro villainy decks that plays Cunning will be interested in playing Asajj over Boba Fett. But because Boba Fett only deploys one turn earlier and he has like much better stats, his ability to untap resources is still very valuable in aggro deck, and obviously Fire Spray is such an amazing card in an aggro deck. So I'm not entirely convinced that she's going to see play, but she's in a vacuum a very good leader, and I think that if Boba gets banned, which I think is likely to be the case sooner or later, it would leave the space for this leader to be a thing, and I think she can be very powerful. So it's gonna be a thumbs up for me for Asajj Ventress. Next we got Roger, which is a fun little meme card where that's basically is persistent, get defeated, come back into play on battle droids and stuff, which is pretty cool. It is a cool combo. There's a cool combo with Roger and Finn, where you can use Finn to discard Roger, give an experience token to the battle droid, and then bring back the Roger back into the battle droid. And this way, every turn you can grow the battle droid. It's fun. It's not particularly strong, and obviously the fact that Finn is heroism and battle droids are most likely going to be villainy, it's going to make it a little bit difficult to work, but it's a kind of a fun little meme combo that you can do in casual games. Yeah, other than this, I think the card is just pretty not particularly strong. I don't think this is the kind of card that you want to play. The battle droids are not meant to be used to be fighting with. They are most likely just fodder for exploit, 90% of the case. So yeah, no, I don't think this is a particularly good card. Oh, we talked about this one. Moving on to Pyrrhic Assault. So for this fetch, each friendly unit gains when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy unit. So what I don't like about this card is, so basically this card is meant to be, you have a bunch of units in play and you want to use them as removal. So you just sacrifice all of your units, and as they die, they deal 2 damage. So suddenly, like, any single of your battle droids can be sacrificed to deal 3 damage to kill a 2-drop or something. That can be quite powerful, but it is a costly endeavor because you're paying 3 resources and then you're sacrificing your board. It's a high price to pay for doing something like this, and that's assuming you have a way to defeat it. Let's say you have your battle droids on the ground and your opponent is playing in space, then you can't even sacrifice those units. So unless you play this and then you play an exploit card, yeah, it just seems to be a lot of effort for not a lot of stuff going on. And there's, in my opinion, way easier ways to do this. For example, you got battle droids. You can simply play as Assault Pattern Delta, and you can grow those battle droids to be able to defeat almost anything. And then you can use the battle droids to crash into the enemy and just kill them. And Assault Pattern Delta will have the advantage of being able to be a pump spell that you can use to attack base. So it's a more flexible card that has multiple uses, while this one has only the use of the control way. It costs the same price in the same aspect combination. So yeah, I don't think this card is very good. I think there's just better things to do in the game. So I give it, it has a pretty unique effect, so maybe, but I think it's unlikely to see play. And if it ever sees plays, it's going to be super incredibly niche. Next we got Guerrilla Insurgency, which gives me a lot of nostalgia because this reminds me of a magic card called Wildfire. Unfortunately, I don't think this card is particularly good. I don't see what kind of deck would ever want to play an effect like this. If you're playing a control deck, having to defeat your own resource, because it's a symmetrical effect, right? Both players are going to be losing a resource, discarding 2 cards, and dealing 4 damage to each of their ground units. So this is some sort of it does a lot of things, but it doesn't do any of those things particularly well. So the resource defeating effect is kind of a bummer because you're most likely going to be playing this in a control deck, and having to defeat your own resource when you're playing a control deck is a no-go. It means that if you want to get to Krayt Dragon, to your big 9-drops and stuff, it's going to be more, put you further away from that, so it actually hurts you more than it hurts the opponent. Discarding card is nice, but for such a high cost, there's just better ways to do this in the game, between Pillage or even I forgot the name, Forced Surrender. And then the deal of 4 damage to each ground unit is nice, but it's only 4 damage for 8 that you're spending, so it's not, the ratio is not great. And then and then it only works on ground units as well, which is makes the card not very flexible at all. So unfortunately, I don't think this card is very good. Once again, it does a lot of things, but it doesn't do any of those things particularly well. Maybe there's a way where you're playing a deck that wants, where you actually want to discard cards, or a deck that wants to have his resource being defeated. Like basically, Wildfire in Magic is a card that works in a deck that will turn the downside into an upside. So maybe in that context, this card can see play. So I don't think it's unplayable forever because it has a very unique effect. But I don't think in the current environment this card is good. That's why I don't think it's good. Padawan Starfighter. I don't think this card is terrible. There's a lot more force unit now in the game. So you can very easily turn this into a 2/4. 2/4 for 2 in space is pretty decent. Yes, it's conditional. So that's we talked about this earlier with Bo-Katan, that conditional stat bonus are not always great. In this case, something I like about the Padawan Starfighter is the fact that it has a lot of very useful trade, your Jedi and Republic, which means that you can combine it with there's 2 of them, and then you can sheet a Jedi or any Republic 5-drops into play on turn 2, and this can be a way to do that. So I think for that reason, I'll give it a try, maybe just, I think it has a chance to see play. It's not completely out of the question that you would want to play that. Next, we got Daughter of Dathomir. Dathomir? Anyway, I have no idea who those are. Anyway, it is a conditional 3/5/4 that if it's undamaged, get Restore 2. I think if the Restore 2 was unconditional, we just straight up Restore 2, 3/5, Restore 2, I think it would be pretty bad. But of course the fact that it's conditional makes her pretty much garbage. And I think the easy way to realize this is just to compare it with Kanan. Kanan doesn't have Restore 2, it's kind of a Restore 1.5 on average. But he's a 4/5 for 4, it has 1+1 attack, and it also has the Rebel trait. Obviously, it is cunning. It is vigilance and heroism, so you can't play this in the villainy deck. But in my opinion, this is just too far below the power level of a Kanan to be worth playing, in my opinion. Moving on, we got Grievous Reassembly that deals 3 damage from units and then Credo Battle Droids. Healing damage from unit is fairly situational. Getting a Battle Droid is nice if you're playing the right deck for it, but then paying 2 for that is not great. So once again, this card does 2 things, but it doesn't do any of those two things particularly well. So I don't think this is a good card. I think it's too just the healing effect is too situational, and then if you're not using that healing effect, then suddenly it's just a put a Battle Droid for 2, which is not good. Then we got Reprocess, a very interesting card that reminiscence to obviously restock, but this one is a little bit different. First of all, it cannot restock itself. One of the great value of restock is like restock can actually put itself at the bottom of the deck, meaning that you can basically, unless your opponent has some sort of special milling effect like Vigilance, whenever you got a restock in your deck, you are effectively unmillable, which is kind of cool. You can't do the same thing with Reprocess because you can only put units back at the bottom of your deck, but you do get some Battle Droids for doing it. So the role of this card is completely different as Restock. Restock is kind of a alternative win condition for control decks, and an anti-meal card. This card helps against meal, but not to the same extent, but it can give you a lot of Battle Droids. It can give you up to 4 Battle Droids for 3, which is really, really good. Unfortunately, it's quite situational. Usually you want to be playing tokens in the early stage of the game, so then you can exploit them later on. So the fact that this card cannot produce 4 tokens early on in the game is a problem, because as I said, token generators are useful in the early stage of the game, because you're not going to have 4 units in your discard at the beginning of the game. That's just not even physically possible. So obviously most of the time you're not even later on in the game, you're not necessarily going to have the full 4 units. You might have like 3, which is still decent. Like for 3 is pretty good. And then 2 it starts to become like not super worth it. So I think this card, if you want to play this in your exploit deck as a way to generate a bunch of tokens with only 1 card, as well as putting some units back in the deck. I think it can be something you want to play as a 1 or 2 of for very long games, for grindy games where a lot of units have died. Your opponent played like Super Laser Blast, and then you want to play this. You can repopulate your deck with your board with a bunch of tokens, meaning it makes all the exploit card you play later on. But even as I said, exploits is not super important of a mechanic later on in the game, because later on in the game you're gonna have loads of resources, so you can just simply most of the time just outcast your card. So yeah, exploit loses a lot of this value later on in the game, and then so I think this card is. Obviously, the value of being able to put cards back into your deck has some value as well against Meal once again. So I think this card is a decent sideboard card against Control, and my SP player is the 1 or 2 of here in the exploit decks, whether in the main deck and the sideboard. So I think it's a decently good card. Then we had Yuang. This card is a bit hard to evaluate because it's very unique. It gives basically permanent +2/+2 bonus to something as long as it stays in play. The 2/4 for 3, the stats are not great, but then if you take into account the +2/+2, then suddenly you're getting 10 points of stats for 3 resources, which is a very, very good rate. Obviously, this stats boost is conditional. If the unit dies, the stats goes away, and you need to have another unit in play as you play this card in order to get the stat bonus. It is also as useful trait your Jedi droids, but more importantly, it is playable for both villainy and heroism. So I think this card is, I give it a try. I'm not sure if it's going to see play or not. It's very unique. We've never seen something like this before. So it'll be interesting to see how strong that is in constructed. I think it has a chance to be played, and we'll find out if it is. Strategic Acumen. This card, I think, is a bit of a sleeper, and not a lot of people have talked about it, and I think this card is actually pretty good. You're only paying 1, you get a +2 stat bonus, and the ability is quite useful. So obviously the biggest comparison just places on the displacer, on the displacer. The displacer is pretty much only played in Luke, because Luke is the only leaders in the game that can play him on turn 1, give him a shield, and makes him a lot harder to kill, and then start benefiting from the extra discount every turn, and also benefit from the discount because you can play like a 2-drop with like Echo-based Defender as a 2, and then spend the extra resources to put a shield on it. Like, that's very strong. This card turns a unit into a displacer, and the thing is though, you can play a unit that's already difficult to kill, so something that has a lot of health, or something that has a shield on it, like for example a Moisture Farmer, and then suddenly the unit becomes insanely difficult to kill because he has tons of health, and then you can use it every turn to get discounts on units. So that's pretty good. It is a bit more clunky to use because you need to have this 1-drop and the Strategic Acumen in your hand as this goes on. So it's a little bit harder to set up, but it's also very flexible. You can play this like during the game and benefit from the action right away. So let's say you already have a 1-drop into play, you can play Strategic Acumen and then use the ability, so you effectively play the card for free, and then it becomes a +2 health bonus for free, which is kind of nice. So I think this card is kind of decent. I'm giving it a try here. Because as I said, I don't think it's as reliable on Dispatcher plus Luke, because Luke being your leader, you're always going to have it. You only have to draw the Dispatcher, while here you have to draw this card plus a 1-drop. But the fact that it has more utility throughout the game because it can be played and then tapped right away, I think this has value. So I think I'm ready to give this card a try to see. I think it might see a little bit of play. I don't think it's going to be mind-boggling, but it might see play. Then we got In Defense of Kamino, and I have to say, finally, a card that wants to make me play the Republic clone deck, because so far, all those coordinate cards have been super underwhelming, and the token generators for the clones are almost systematically worse than the one for the droids. So I'm really glad that we finally get a good reason to play Republic Clone Troopers deck, because this card is very strong in those decks. So what it does is like it basically gives your Republic all your Republican units restore 2, and then when they get defeated, they generate a Clone Trooper. So what is very strong with this ability is that you get to basically, so let's say you got a bunch of, you get 3 Clone Troopers into play. you give all the, and you're playing against aggro, you play this card, you give Restore 2 to each of your clones, and suddenly you can attack with those clone troopers into the enemy, crash into the enemy, kills his enemy units, get a bunch of health back, and then your clone troopers come back. That is so good. That is very good. So obviously it is quite situational, and it is cost 4, but I think it's a very strong card in the right situation. So I give it a thumbs up. Obviously, what holds this card down a little bit is the fact that that is obviously limited to Republic units. Obviously, this card would be insane if it was possible for Separatists as well. But yeah, I think this card is pretty solid. And finally, a good reason to be playing the clones. Is that going to be enough to make the clone token deck playable? I don't know, but it's for sure if this deck ever sees play, this card will be in there. That's for sure. Then we got the Resolute, and once again here, even on the big capital ships, the Republic are kind of are getting the short end of the stick here. This guy is simply just overpriced. I mean, yes, you can reduce the price for every 5 damage in your base, but the thing is, like, once again, on average, you might get like 10 damage on your base as the result comes down. Then it bombs down to 8 for 8. Not a great. And the one playability deal 2 damage to enemy units is not amazing. I mean, granted, it also deals 2 damage to enemy with the same name as that unit, but that is fairly situational. It's going to be good against tokens, I guess, but Red have already a million different ways of dealing with those tokens anyway. So yeah, I'm not super excited about this card. And some people have been comparing to Avenger. Avenger has just such a bigger impact on the game because it just kills unit outright. This unit is a lot more situational. Even if you get to play it for a cheaper price than Avenger, the impact on the game is just not even close to be the same. So I'm personally not very optimistic about this one. Moving on, we got the EV PS Raider tank. And something I've come to realize with exploit cards is that, in my opinion, it's going to take something very, very special for exploit cards that don't have an immediate impact on the game to see play. And the reason for it is simply because you play your exploit cards, you spend a lot of tokens and stuff to make it happen, and if that unit gets dealt with, it's a massive, massive blow for you. It killed or bounce, it's a massive blow for you. So in my opinion, the only exploit card that are going to see play are going to be the one who has an immediate impact on the game. And every Persuader tank does have that, sort of, because deal 2 damage to a ground unit, that's not amazing. So yeah, I don't think this card is good enough for Constructed. It's probably most likely a draft card. So yeah, the impact on the game is simply just not enough. The stats are not great. Whenever you do spend your board and your hard-earned droid tokens, you do not want to spend those precious tokens on units that are not so amazing. So moving on, we got Clear the Field. It's basically a waylay for only 2 resources, but only works on units that cost 3 or less. However, it also bans units that have the same name. Definitely a lot better than some of the other cards that we've seen here just before. Obviously, the fact that it only bans units that cost 3 or less is a big bummer, because usually you want to waylay very large units because they represent a much bigger tempo swing. But the fact that it is cheaper, and the fact that it can also copy a card with the same name, that is significant. Something I've realized is this card, for example, can be quite good as a toolbox card for Aid from the Innocent, or Aid from the Weak, I think. It's the 5 resource heroism cunning card that you can play, and you can look at the top, I think it's top 10 or top 8 cards, and you can grab 2 heroism events, and you can pay those, if they cost 2 or less, you can pay them for free. So this would be one of the cards that you could put in a toolbox card like this that could be quite useful in that situation. I don't think it's amazing, but I think it might see a little bit of play. I'll give it a try. It obviously depends on whether Aid for the Weak is going to see play or not. Then we got Patrol AAT. Yeah, not particularly exciting. A bit overpriced. So probably just a draft card. And then we got Nala Se. Nalace or Nalace or Nalace, I don't know. Anyway, she is very unique because she allows you to ignore aspect penalties on your clone. That means you can play Heroism clone in your deck, in your um, villainy deck. And it turns out there are a few very strong clones, and some of them are not even, that are not in this expansion. For example, Wrecker is a clone. So Nalace allows you to play Wrecker ECL in a villainy deck, so you can play Wrecker ECL and Overwhelming Barrage in the same deck, which is kind of cool. So unfortunately, I've tried to build a little bit with her, and that seems to be really the only major thing that this guys bring to the table. It turns out that there's just not that many amazing clones in Heroism at the moment that you would want to play in your villainy deck. One of the things that I strongly dislike with this leader is its color combination. The fact that it is villainy, vigilance is really hurting the leader a lot, because I think a leader like this would want to be command, because then in command you can play the double command, and then you can start playing the double command token generator that allows you to give you 2 clones for 3 resources, like stuff like, and play cards like and you can play cards like command, for example, and you still don't have any aspect penalties, stuff like that. So or you want, like, the problem I have with this thing is, like, right now you cannot play any token generators. Like, her ability to each friendly clone gains heal 2 damage from your base. That's useful if you got a lot of clone into play, and right now there's no good clone generators that are in that are clone themselves. I think there's just the Battle Brothers, the Batch Brothers. That's about it. And that means you won't be able to populate a board of clones like a Heroism deck, because the card that put clones into play are still Heroism and are not concerned by the ignore aspect penalty from Nalace. So that's just a little bit awkward here, because she wants you to put a lot of clones into play, but the clone generator cards are not available for you, or at least not available at a discount. So that's a problem with the card. Another problem with the card is the ability. So basically 1/7 is atrocious stats, like you can't really do anything with as a 1/7. However, it is good if you value the ability, because it means that now you have this ability and it's going to require a lot of resource for the opponent to get rid of that ability. Unfortunately, that ability is not useful against a lot of decks. For example, control decks do not care if you heal every time you defeat a unit. They will simply just manage your board. So this ability is effectively completely useless against control decks. So that's a major issue here. So I understand. So obviously there's a world where this card is amazing, but right now I don't think we live in such world. There's still like a fair few cards that need to be spoiled, so I'm gonna keep an open mind and see if Nalace can turn things around with very nice like clones, cross combination, things that I haven't seen. So I'm gonna give it a benefit of the doubt and give it a try, but I'm not very optimistic for Nalace at the current moment. Next we got Shadowed Intentions. So Shadowed Intention is a very unique card that basically for 3 resources turn a unit pretty much just invincible against anything that is not damaged. So you can still attack the unit and defeat it like this, or just play card like Open Fire to deal damage. So it's a bit different from forgot the name. From TIE Phantoms. TIE Phantoms does not take any damage from anything, while Shadow Intentions you can still take damage. However, Shadow Intentions protects you from bounce effect and from capture effect, which is kind of neat. So overall, what do I think about this card? So first of all, the possibilities that the fact that this unit can be attached on anything, including leaders, is insane. It's potentially insane, because it turns out that turning your leader into almost an invisible machine, the fact that you can play your leader for free and then your opponent has a very small time window to answer them, and then you can play this equipment, and then the leader is almost invincible. This by itself is very, very powerful. We saw this, for example, with Boba Fett's armor, and being able to have that kind of effect on almost any other leaders in the game is incredibly powerful. So obviously, the unit can still be dealt with damage, but it turns out that protecting a unit from damage is not that difficult in this game. You can use card to heal the leaders. You can boost its health to make it more difficult to kill. You can put shields on them. You can put shield on them. You can, like, there's loads of things you can do, and to prevent this from happening. And there's certain type of decks that simply don't deal damage. If you're not playing red, then the only way you can deal damage is the units that you have on the board. I mean, and you also have ambush unit, I guess, but once again, you can play around those cards because they only deal a set amount of damage, while a card like Rival's Fall or even like Takedown are much more difficult to play around. So, and obviously, this card is not a card you can just jam in any deck. You have to play a specific deck in order to make this card work, but I think in the right deck, this card is potentially insane. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Obviously, Shadow Intention combined with Boba Fett's armor is basically the leader is effectively invincible. Like, there's no real way you can kill that. It's just so incredibly difficult. You can also go Shadow Intention on the Chirrut, and makes the Chirrut incredibly difficult to kill, to say the least. And then if you got a bunch of heal in your deck, a bunch of ways to boost Chirrut's health, good luck with that. It's going to be incredibly difficult. Obviously, this can not only be played on leaders. Playing this on any unit has huge potential. You play this on a unit that already has a shield or already has some sort of ability that prevents it from being killed. That also can be very, very powerful. So obviously, the upgrades can be removed. You still do need the combination of right cards. So it's a card that really is going to require you to build around it for this to be good. There's ways in the game to search for upgrades. So that also makes the card pretty good in that sense. So overall, what do I think about this card? It's a hard card to evaluate, right? Because it's a very combo-focused card. It's not a card you can jam in your deck. I think at the very least, we're going to see this card in sideboard. I think that's clear that at least in the very least, it's going to be a very powerful sideboard card. Notably against control. The ability to turn any of your units into a sort of into a TIE Phantom. That's just very strong, because if you're playing against a hard control deck, this card is basically just this card turned into a TIE Phantom. And the thing is, like, TIE Phantoms can be dealt with because he has very low stats. You can give it -2/-2 with either Make an Opening or Snoke, and usually that's the way control deck deal with TIE Phantoms. But if you give this to something that is like a 6/7 or something that is like a 5/5 or even something as a 4/4, good luck getting rid of this. It's going to be incredibly difficult. So at the very least, this card is going to be insane against control. It might change the way control decks exist. I mean, maybe control decks that are solely based on blue that are going to be a lot more difficult to play. It's just a very tricky situation for them. And then finally, there's obviously various archetypes that can be created from this card. We can see decks like I said, there's Voltron's archetypes based on that card that are going to appear, starting to appear. So I think the impact on the meta for this card is potentially big enough that I'm ready to give this card, for the very first time since I've reviewed Trials of the Republic, an amazing rating. I think this card, as I said, it's not a guaranteed. There's a way this card is just simply not good enough, but I think at the very least it's going to be sideboard card. But it has the potential to turn the meta upside down. It has a chance to spawn new archetypes and new things, and I think that's a pretty big deal. Moving on, we talk about, we are going way lower here in power level with Finn. Unfortunately, for the second time in Star Wars Unlimited, Finn is being done dirty here. Yeah, first of all, 3-4-4-3, not amazing stats. Now the standard is starting to become like kind of a 3-5-4-3. If you are a 3-4-4-3, you need to have a pretty decent ability to make up for that. It's also double vigilance, which obviously strongly restrict the amount of card that can be played in this deck. And the ability is unfortunately pretty bad. When this unit completes an attack, that means no immediate impact on the game. You choose a unique unit, and for that phase, if damage would be dealt to, then prevent 1 damage of that unit. How often will that ability be matter? I think very rarely. It's just an incredibly bad card in my opinion. So yeah, unfortunately, Finn has been done dirty for the second time here for in Star Wars Limited. Moving on, we got Death by Droids, and this card is kind of cool. You remove all and put battle droids on the battlefield at the same time. This is kind of a valuable ability in my opinion. In an exploit deck. The only problem is, like, I think it's a little bit overpriced. I think at 5 resources, I think it's to be quite costly. Personally, I would have preferred this to be at 4 resources. I think at 5 it's just a little bit overpriced, but it might see play. I don't think this is out of question to play that card. Moving on, we got the Xylo Beast. This card is really cool because blue, especially blue heroism, has been looking for a top ender for a very long time. Right now, in terms of top end finisher for a control blue heroism deck, basically the best you got was Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, and the Redemption. And Redemption is not really a finisher, it's more like of a control card, to be fair, that just heals you for a bunch. The deck they've been looking for like a big top ender for a very long time, and finally we get one. So obviously, will that kind of deck emerge from the new set? I don't know. But this card is definitely kind of on the list for... It would definitely be a strong consideration for if you were to be playing... I think if you're playing Villainy, you got better options. Like Avenger is much better than this, let's be honest. But I think if you're playing Heroism, there is an argument for this card to be made. First of all, it does have an immediate impact on the board, which is very important for a card that expensive. It only works on the ground, which is kind of a bummer. Then the 10/10 can kill you very quickly. The fact that it heals itself at the regroup phase for every turn, that's neat, but I don't think it's a very big deal. It makes it a little bit a lot more difficult to kill for the opponent. The opponent is going to have to pile up damage on the same turn to be able to get rid of it. So yeah, I'm going to give this card a maybe. First of all, maybe for 2 reasons. The first reason is I'm not sure that Vigilance, Heroism, Control decks are going to be a thing in this set. If they do a set emerge, maybe the meal card, I forgot their name, but like the 0/6 that turns your unit into a milling machine, might be just a better finisher than this. But I think it's not completely out of the question that this card is going to see play in some decks. Then last but not least, we got my favorite character in Star Wars, and probably one of the most unique design that we've ever seen in Star Wars Unlimited. It is obviously the Chancellor Palpatine that can switch into Darth Sidious. So this is a 2-sided leader. So first of all, I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain how this works. It's a 2-sided leader. It cannot turn into a unit. It basically is always a leader, and it just switches from one side to the other side. It starts on the Chancellor Palpatine side, so for the purpose of Twin Suns, it is an heroism leader. And then the way that works is that the aspect penalty that applies to your cards depend on which side your Palpatine is on. If it's on the heroism side, you get your discount on your heroism card. If it's on the dark side, you get your discount on the villainy cards. So it starts on heroism, which means that most likely in your deck, your 2 drops or your card that you want to play on turn 1 are going to be heroism. Otherwise, you're going to have aspect penalty. And basically, if a friendly heroism unit was defeated this phase, you get to draw a card, heal from your base, and then you can flip your leader on the other side. When the leader is flipped on the other side, it is exhausted. So basically, you cannot just flip back and forth multiple times in the same turn. So that means that regardless of what's going to happen during a turn, you can only play villainy card or vigilant cards, not both. When it's on the dark side, the way you flip it on the other side is by playing a villainy card, and then you can create a clone trooper and then deal 2 damage to the enemy base. So obviously it's all about playing vigilant. So the good thing is like Palpatine, you need to be playing a lot of heroism units in your deck in order to be able to flip Palpatine on the other side. And basically, Dark Sidious also gives you some clone troopers, which are heroism unit themselves, as a way, so then you know that you're gonna have a way to flip it on the other side. So it's a very interesting design. It's a very, very interesting design. And I'm just want to say that this is definitely makes me very excited for the future of Star Wars Unlimited, because the possibility that it opens up to have leaders with 2 sides like this are just massive and very, very fun and interesting. I'm glad that they are willing to step into this dangerous zone, because obviously those leaders are probably very difficult to balance because they are much more they're very unique and they work completely differently. The fact that you don't have a leader unit that deploys completely turns upside down the way you're going to be balancing those leaders. So from a design standpoint, it is very brave to be designing something like this, and I'm really glad that FFG is willing to step into that territory. What do I think about this leader? Unfortunately, I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good, and I'll explain you why. So first of all, before saying it's bad, I said I did some investigation and asked if it is ever possible. I was wondering if it was possible to flip, even let's say you don't have any unit leaving play. Because of the then, I was hoping that you could flip the leader unconditionally, even if a heroism unit has not left play. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. It's actually been confirmed 100% by the designers that indeed you have to have a friendly heroism unit to flip it on the other side, and to flip it on the other side, you have to be playing a villainy card. So why do I think this card is bad? So let's talk about the good thing. The good thing is like obviously drawing cards, healing your base, dealing damage to your base, putting some clone troopers, all this for free. That's a lot of value that you can generate over time. But here's the problem. There's 2 major problems. The first problem is obviously no leader unit. Not having a leader in the game of Star Wars Unlimited at all is a massive, massive downside. It is basically just not a free unit that is a relatively large unit by that. So in order to make up for having such a large units, then the ability has to be very, very strong. And the ability is very strong. Getting all that values for free is strong. But it's not, I think it's something you have to understand is like, it's a very strong ability, but it's here to make up for the fact that you don't have a leader deploy. Like, it's not like this ability and then you got a leader deploy. No, it's this ability and that's all you get. You don't get the leader deploy. So that's a massive, massive deal. Another very big problem with this leader, and I think the deal breaker for this leader is, so one of the cool things as well is that you can play a deck that has both vigilance and villainy card, heroism and villainy card in your deck. And that's amazing because then you can have both of them. But the downside of this is that this leader is going to be incredibly clunky to use, because you really have to be, so let me give you an example. Let's say you have Chancellor Palpatine, you play your heroism unit turn 1, and then your opponent plays Cloud Rider and kills your heroism unit. And no, let's say for any reason, you don't have heroism unit in play, and your Chancellor Palpatine is on the heroism side, and all you got in hands is all the card that you want to play is black. Well, you're screwed. You are screwed. You can't play that card. You have to play another card, and then it spirals out of control right now because you can't. Let's say you can't play anything. That means you can't play an heroism unit. The deck, as you lost to your own deck. You can't play anything because you'll have no heroism unit in play. The card that you can play in your hand are villainy cards, And then I don't know if it's hard to explain, but like it's gonna be much more obvious when people are gonna be starting playing with it to realize the problem here. But the problem is that your play is that you can literally lock yourself out of the game. You can literally prevent yourself from playing the game, and you have an extra layer of randomness of stuff that is completely outside of your control that's going to be added to your game of Star Wars Unlimited that no other player has to deal with, and that's a major issue. Another issue, of course, is options. Every turn your option is going to be extremely restricted because now your deck is kind of cut in half between the card that you can play at certain moments and the card that you can't play at certain moments. And that's going to be a major problem. So I think people don't fully appreciate and understand how big of a downside that is to not be able to play the card you want the moment you want. And I think this is the major deal breaker with Palpatine. If Palpatine was able to switch from one side to another unconditionally, then it would be amazing. It would be very strong. And it would be well worth not having a leader unit. But in this case, that's not what we're talking about here. It is fairly conditional. There is a conditional. The condition of having to play a black unit to flip it on the heroism unit, you can have the same problem where you got Dark Sidious on the dark side and you only have heroism cards in hand. What do you do here? You can't do anything. Or like the card that you want to play, I only heroism. There's suddenly, you're going to have to deck build your deck in order to mitigate that issues. You have to play a lot of heroism units in your deck. But you still have to play like a certain amount of villainy cards to be able to flip on the other side. And then you're not always going to be able to draw the way. I don't see, maybe there's someone who's going to be able to break the code here and find a way to make this super consistent. But on face value here, once again, those are our first impression video. And I'm giving my first impression. And at first impression, I don't see how this can be viable. That's going to be kind of my first option. It is a very cool design, but from a competitive standpoint, I think it's far too limiting in terms of play pattern for this to ever be good. That's my hot take. This is a hot take because obviously this leader is so incredibly different from anything we've seen before, and I haven't played with it. So obviously my opinion is very heel informed at this moment, but those, once again, it's the name of the channel. It's Talk Hot Take, so it is a hot take, and I could be very wrong. And honestly, guys, I want to be fairly honest. I hope I'm wrong. I'm really hoping I'm wrong because I would love these leaders to be good. I would love it to be good, but I don't see it. And the name of the channel is Hot Take. I have to give my opinion. I have to give my honest opinion about this. And my honest opinion is that at this moment in time, we are on the 19th of October 2024. I don't see how can this work. Or how can this work consistently. In any case, thank you for following this video. Let me know what you think, especially about this card. And if you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I think we're probably gonna have all the spoilers by next week, so I'll make a videos when I talk about the last cards of the set. And thank you so much for following. I'll see you next time.